Okay, here, the second question on this worksheet number 7, we're trying a different way to demonstrate the games from trade. Okay, as we said before, this is a challenge topic, so we would like to use multiple ways to get this point across. Okay, and here, question number 2 says, please complete the following table based upon the information provided in the 3 tables of question number 1. In other words, we still build upon the information previously discussed. Okay, and here let's spend a little bit of time talking about the structure of this table. Okay, so here you find 2 countries, England and Portugal, and the units of corns and sweaters they produced. Okay? And the first panel, or the top panel, you find the pre-trade production. So we already give you how much they produced without trade or before trade. Okay, and we said that their production equals their consumption, because remember, they are isolated, they are separate from each other. So for example, England produces 2 corns, then it has only 2 corns to consume. Okay, there's no more available without trade. All right, so that's why we said the production equals consumption. Now post-trade, so after they trade with each other, then we can figure out, how much they would like to produce because of their comparative advantage. Okay, we actually give you how much Portugal would like to produce here. Okay, 3 corns and 0 sweaters. So if you remember in the previous question, we already said that Portugal has a comparative advantage in corn production. That's why it spends all 60 units of labor producing corns. Okay, all right, and then we would like to check out how much they would like to trade with each other. In other words, exports and imports. Okay, how many units and what good. And eventually we're going to look at the consumption. Now here, with trade or post-trade, consumption could be different from production, right? Because what has been produced in England can be exported to Portugal. So it won't be available for English people to consume, but it will be available for Portuguese to consume. So in this case, or in the middle panel, you find that production and consumption would be different. Okay, and the bottom panel, we're going to show gains from trade, but this time, instead of looking at the price difference in both countries, we're going to look at the consumption difference. Okay, how much more they are consuming. If with trade, people can consume more of at least one good, okay, and keep the consumption of the other good constant, then we could say the benefit from trade. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and do this. Okay, and here let's start with the Portugal, because we have more information available, right? So we said that it used to produce 1.5 corns without trade. Now it produces 3 corns. Right? That means it gets more, so it can export, right? And here we also find that it produced 1 sweater without trade. Now it spends all resources in corn production, so it produces 0 sweater, right? Now, as we said, if we want to show gains from trade, we would not like to see any decrease in consumption, right? Because that could mean, even you said Portuguese are gonna consume more corns but less sweater. It's hard to say that they are really better off, right? It's easier for us to say Portuguese are consume more of both, or at least more of one thing but keep the other things constant, right? Now here, let's assume that they import one sweater from England, okay? Because the Portuguese do not produce sweaters, so they import one. Why we said import one? Because it has to get it from England, right? So that's import to Portugal. And we use the number one because they used to produce one. So they used to have one sweater to consume, right? So here, let's say let's keep the sweater consumption the same as before, right? So they produce 0, but they get 1 from England. So their consumption would be 1. So the change in consumption, the sweater consumption would be 0. It doesn't make any difference for their sweater consumption, right? But to be able to buy one sweater from England, they have to export corms, right? How many corms they can export to get one sweater? Again, come back here. Look at the trading price we come up with in table 3. We said that the trading price got to be somewhere in between, right? Between these pre-trade prices. And we said that we just arbitrarily pick this one. One sweater equals 1 corm, so that it will be very easy for us to calculate. All right. So for Portuguese, when they import one sweater, they have to give up 1 corm, right? They give up it to England, so they export 1 corm to England. In exchange, they get 1 sweater back, right? Now the Portuguese produce 3 corms, but export 1, so they only have 2 to consume, right? Now they got 2 corms to consume, but remember, without trade, they only have 1.5 corms to consume. So eventually, the change in consumption is positive 0.5. Okay. In other words, because of the trade, Portuguese are better off because they got half a corm more than what they had without trade. Okay. All right. Now, once we figure out the Portuguese, we're going to come back and look at England. Okay. England, as we said, it has a comparative advantage in sweater production, right? So it will produce sweaters, okay, and produce relatively more sweaters. But we also know, from the Portuguese case, it imports 1 sweater from England. That means England would export 1, right? Because these 2 imports and exports got to be corresponding, get matched with each other, right? Portuguese import this 1 sweater from England. That means England exports 1. And the same thing here. Portuguese exports 1 corm to England. That means England import 1 corm, right? Okay. Now, again, if you look at the corms, you would find that, if we want to keep the consumption of corm in England the same as the pre-trade case, it has to produce at least 1 corm, right? Because, let me change the color. If English people produce 1 corm and import 1 from Portugal, then their consumption would stay the same as before, right? Okay, so that's why we said they have to produce at least 1 corm. Okay, and this way we would find the change in corm consumption in England would be 0. Okay, they used to produce 2 corms without trade. Now with trade, they get 2 corms to consume, exactly the same, right? Now let's look at the sweater. This is an interesting part. If England decides to produce 1 corm, go back to the question. To produce 1 corm, England has to spend 15 units of labor, right? But we said in part B, it has 60 units of labor. So after producing 1 corm, England has 45 units of labor left. 60 minus 15, right? It has 40 units of labor available to the sweater production. I'm sorry, 45, right? 60 minus 15, so 45 units of labor available to the sweater production. Now, with 45 units of labor, it can produce 9 sweaters. So it's 45 divided by 5, okay? 45 divided by 5. So you will be able to produce 9 sweaters here, all right? Again, if you add these up, okay, the production of 1 corn in 9 sweaters, it has to be equal to 60 units of labor, okay? It has to, spend that much labor. The same thing for Portugal. Okay, it produces 3 corms, and as we said before, it needs 20 units of labor to produce each corm. So 3 corms means 60 units of labor has already been used up. Okay. All right. Now come back here. England produces 9 sweaters, but it export 1 to Portugal. So what's left for English people to consume would be 8 sweaters. Now, without trade, they have 6 sweaters. With trade, they have 8 sweaters. So their sweater consumption increases by 2. All right. Believe it or not, we already show you the games of trade. Okay, one more time with the change in consumption. Okay, again for England. Its corn production stays the same. So nobody gets hurt, right? You still have the same amount of corns to consume, but they have 2 more sweaters, okay? So they are better off. For Portugal, their sweater production stays the same, okay? They used to get 1, now they have 1 as well. But their corn production increases by half corn. So they are better off as well, okay? Putting together, we already shown that, because of trade, both countries will benefit, okay, will be better off. Even for the country without any absolute advantage. In this case, it will be Portugal, okay? All right, so this is the second way to show you games from trade. Now, there's a third question on the worksheet. We're going to use the PPF we learned from chapter 2. On the graph, we're going to show you games from trade. Okay, so this would be the third way to demonstrate how these 2 countries can benefit from trade.